Hello, my name is Patrick Allen, and I am an interviewer for the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. It's conducted through the library, Cincinnati-Hamilton County Public Library, and that's under the direction of Brian Powers. And our cameraman today is Ken Seary, also a veteran, and we are here to do the interview of Tom Petkewitz. Tom's a veteran of Vietnam, and he lives here in Greenville, Ohio. Tom, thank you for agreeing to do this interview. And before we get into your military, let's talk about where and when you were born.
Okay, I was born in Dayton, Ohio at St. Elizabeth Hospital, February 2nd, 1944, Groundhog's Day. I always say my birthday is always a headline story, not my birthday, but the fact that the groundhog either saw or didn't see his shadow. And
where were you born?
Dayton, Ohio.
Your dad's name was Albert?
My dad's name was Albert, and my mother's name was Caroline, and her maiden name was Dolinsky.
D-O-L-I-N-S-K-I?
That's correct.
What did your dad do?
My dad, during World War II, he worked at Frigidaire, and of course they made munitions, and I think some rifles and things like that. And after his employment there, he was a real estate broker and sold real estate, and from there he got into selling cars. He sold originally, he was a long time with Stinger's Ford at 817 North Main Street in Dayton, later on North Dixie in Kettering. He worked for them. He also worked for Peffley's Ford. He worked for Hal Gilliam Ford in New Carlisle. And he also had rented or leased a lot across from the old Stinger's Ford, and had a car dealership or a used car lot on Main Street. I think it was 10 or 12 years. It was a nice thing of him having that, because that was during my high school years, and got to drive some nice cars on the weekend.
Is that what he was doing when he retired?
He sold cars, and I don't think he'd mind if I said it, but he worked for Ken's Cars, and they were just down the street from his old lot, and he was retired by then. But he said he sold cars, and I would tell people he was the lookout for the card games in the back of the building.
Do you know what job he did during the war years?
Well, as best I can determine, he got a pretty good job when he went there, and he may have also been a foreman. And of course, the things that they manufactured, I think, was the M1A, which was a carbine. Whether or not they made the actual M1s there, I don't know. And they may have been involved in the manufacture of machine guns, too.
And that was located in Dayton?
Yeah, that was down in the Moraine area, I guess you'd call it.
Do you have any idea of how your mom and dad met?
You'd be interested in this, because my dad played basketball for Chaminade, and my mother played basketball for Wayne High School. And so because of that common interest they had, and they knew each other from games, I guess, that they struck up a friendship, and that's where he essentially met her.
Have any idea when they were married, what year?
I really don't know.
Okay.
I'd be totally guessing.
Now, after you were born, where did you live here in Dayton?
The places where I remember living, even as a little tiny kid, was Wayne Avenue, kind of at the bottom of the hill as you come down from Wilmington, I guess it comes into Wayne, and also on Carlisle Avenue, which ran into, I think, Wyoming and Xenia Avenue in East Dayton. Then in 1948 or 49, my parents moved to an area out by Walnut Grove Country Club on Route 35 in Greene County, right over the Montgomery County line. And they happened to pick that location because my mother was kind of an entrepreneur, that she had her own grocery store on Huffman Hill in East Dayton. And from there, they went out and moved or bought this place. Pretty big house, a lot of bedrooms, a lot of garage space, separate garages, and had a tourist home there, a Greenmont tourist home. And
how long did they have the tourist home?
I don't really remember exactly how long it was, but eventually it faded, I guess, and along with my mom's interest in it. And she was a flower person. I mean, I never saw a yard with so many flowers, and all I remember is all the hours that she made me pull weeds out of the flower beds.
Now, did she work there in the grocery store after she had children?
Yes, because my sister was already born, and only from what they tell me, yes, I was an infant, and they talked about tooling around in a stroller. I guess it made it easier for her to conduct her business. My dad actually worked there too, helped her out. He was the butcher. So
okay.
they cut meat, and everything was hand-packed. The brand of canned goods and stuff was White Villa canned goods.
I remember those names. You had brothers. You had a couple brothers.
I had two brothers. Jim, he was third oldest. Joe, who followed in his father's footsteps, and really for the most part of his life, he just retired about a year ago. He was a car salesman.
And your sister was?
My sister was. She's the oldest. I think she's 83 now.
That's Alberta?
Alberta, and she was a registered nurse. She worked at Good Sam for a long time, and for whatever reason, she made a major career change and went into flower business, and probably after my mother, but and I'm talking about commercial flowers, buy and sell.
Did she work for one of the local florist establishments?
I know she did, but I can't remember which one it was.
And was she married?
She was married. I was in high school when she got married.
What was her married name?
And her married name was Rolinski. She married a fellow who ultimately was a professor at the University of Dayton. And that Ed Rolinski, they had 4 children, and it was Ed Jr., I guess, Ricky, Marisha, which I don't know how to spell that name, and Elizabeth. And
I think you told me that he died kind of prematurely.
yeah, he died sometime, I'd say probably in his mid-50s. And he apparently was well thought of at the university. I know there was a scholarship fund that they give in his name, and I wouldn't doubt they probably have a park bench, tree, or maybe even a building that's named after him.
Does Alberta live in the Dayton area now?
Alberta lived out in the Trotwood area, Westbrook, I think it was Westbrook Village, it was called, off of Salem Avenue for a long time. Then after Ed died, she moved up north and lived in, I think, Parma Heights. And
Up near Cleveland?
Right. And eventually, just within the last year, she went to live with her oldest daughter, and that's Elizabeth, in Geauga County.
And that's up north toward the lake?
Right.
And Jim is what, about 70 now?
Jim is 70, 71. He had a major from Wright State in accounting, but I remember his first job that he got was for the IRS, and he did well in school, and they made him an auditor of the auditors. And what that was, I guess he checked up on the auditors. He eventually wasn't satisfied with the job, and I think his first love was carpentry. He learned a lot of carpentry from my uncles on my mother's side, and he had a business, building and all kind of carpentry stuff.
What was the name of his business?
Just Jim Petkewitz, Petkewitz Carpentry.
Did he do residential or commercial, or both?
Well, I know he was with my brother Joe for a while. They were in together, and they built some houses, and he did custom remodeling. He did some remodeling for my first wife and I when we lived on Hampshire Avenue there in Dayton, and he actually did some remodeling for other neighbors in there. I saw a house that he bought in the Belmont area, and it had the older look on the outside, but you walked into it, and it was really nice. And he did all the work himself on that. Eventually, he went to work for Citywide Development as kind of an inspector and a troubleshooter, and if somebody was breaking into a house they were working, he's the one they sent. I don't know why they didn't call the police, but he's the one they sent. He's retired now.
And Jim was married and had family?
Jim was married, had 2 kids. The son went on to become a full-fledged physical therapist. When he achieved that level, he went out and worked with the Indians out west, then came back to this area, and his daughter was kind of a higher up administrator in a corporation or two.
What was his wife's name?
You stumped me right there.
All right. And what was his daughter's name? Did you say Jennifer?
No.
No.
All of a sudden, I'm getting a lot of names rolling around in my head.
Did he just have the one child?
No, he had 2. Lucas was the son, and you'll have to forgive me, but between my 8 grandkids and his grandkids and kids, that.
And your brother Joe was about 67?
Joe, Joe is I think 70. There were about a 2 or 3 year difference between them, and he had Joe. They liked the name Joe. And apparently my mother and dad did too. So you had Joe, then we always called him JoJo, his son. And I get mixed up, but I know if I say Joe something, that's what his grandson is named too.
Do you remember Joe's wife's name?
Kathy.
Okay.
And she works for a wine importing business.
Locally?
The owner, which is her daughter's married to the owner, and they have a very nice house on the outskirts of Lewisburg, but they travel all over. He travels, overseas. I think they just came back from a trip out west, some big wine convention. Wasn't there to drink, I don't think. It was there to sell. So.
So. Let's talk about your schooling. You went to grade school where?
I went to grade school at Immaculate Conception over on Smithfield Road in Dayton.
Did you go all 8 years there?
All 8 years. Actually, there was one short period in which they said after six years or grades at Immaculate, said I'm in the wrong school. You belong in St. Helens, which was a new school. So I went there, felt absolutely isolated. Didn't know anybody, and I don't know what happened, but I got called out of class one day and they said, "You're in the wrong school, you belong in Immaculate Conception." So they took me back. So I graduated from there. And I will have to say, Immaculate Conception, you know, I've been to a lot of reunions, and to me, the most fun reunion of all the ones I went to was the 50-year reunion of Immaculate Conception.
Ah, nice. After Immaculate, you went to college, or you went to high school?
Right, at Chaminade, downtown Dayton, Catholic school.
That was all boys at the time?
All boys, except on the weekends, they allowed the Julienne girls for sock hops.
And they've been combined now?
They've been combined.
Into Chaminade Julienne?
Right.
We talked earlier about your work while you were in school. What kind of things did you do?
First job I had where I was paid by a business, you know, was Casano's Pizza. But even back in grade school, you know, I was a caddy at Walnut Grove Country Club, a shag boy. There may be shag boy, which actually was more lucrative than being a caddy. Shag boy is you go out in their driving range and you retrieve the balls as the person that's hitting at you. I guess you're the flag when he's hitting those balls. But and then also I went into the bait business in the 5th or 6th grade. That was very lucrative for a kid, and you know, when I moved on, it went to my brothers, and when the nest was empty, that we supplied the bait, and my mother sold it, and that business lasted for over 30 years.
Was that just live bait, or did you sell artificials?
Live bait. We didn't have any.
Where did you get your bait from?
We went out and got it ourselves. You either got it out of the creeks or you got night crawlers and red worms out of the yard. My parents had some acreage, so you set things up, and if it was raining and lightning and thunder, that's when you went out and got the night crawlers.
At night?
Right.
With a flashlight?
Right.
I've done some of that in my youth. Well, following, when did you get out of Chaminade? About 1962?
I graduated in 1962.
And then you went to University of Dayton?
Went to University of Dayton, which was an extension of Chaminade. The Meritorious ran University of Dayton, and they ran Chaminade.
Did you consider going to any other colleges?
No. I was busy in the summer, didn't have time to look, and had a UD, catalog. But I struggled with that catalog all 3 months of the summer on, you know, what was I going to take there?
We talked briefly about athletics in high school. Were you in any team sports?
You know, on the regular team, you know, the school teams, basketball, football, you know, so forth, no. But we had a very active intramural program, so I played basketball. We didn't have an actual competitive track team, which I don't understand, but we had track meets, and
intramural track meets?
I guess you would call it intramural, but essentially it was open-ended. Anybody from Chaminade could put into racing all the different races. I ran the short races, 50-yard, 100, 220, 400. Did well in the shorter. Actually, the 220 was my best.
Oh, good.
Now, my dad played basketball at Chaminade. I think he played freshman, and they called it the Eaglettes as freshman. Then he was on JV, and in his junior year, he got beat out by his brother Bill. But he played football at Chaminade, and my mother was a basketball player at Wayne High School, and I think that's where the two met each other, through their sports and basketball. My mother always said she was a better player than him.
And your father would not dispute that in her presence, I'm sure.
He never disputed much with my mother.
So you got out of UD, you go there all 4 years?
All 4 years, and I was in the ROTC program all 4 years. And We had intramurals, obviously didn't pay, but I think I mentioned to you, a lot of people don't believe it, but it was true that I could shoot baskets from half court at the old field house early in the mornings. We'd go in to shoot baskets and make them from half court. I don't think they were the type of shots that you could play in a game because it took too much time to concentrate and set up. But, and up until maybe 5 years ago, I could shoot some long threes on the playground over here against my grandkids.
All right. Where'd you live while you were going to UD? Did you live at home or did you go?
I lived at home, the place on Linden Avenue, the place out in the country, the former Greenmont tourist home. And, you know, from UD, my major was accounting. And I really was not going to be didn't want to be in ROTC because I wasn't really military inclined, I didn't think. And I think the only people that were exempt is the basketball team and the football players, I guess. But for some reason, I think the School of Education, there was no mandatory requirement your first 2 years, and I guess I picked accounting because they said, you know, that seems like to me would be a job that once you graduate, you could find a job pretty quick. And so I majored in accounting.
Were you in ROTC all 4 years?
I was in ROTC all 4 years.
Well, I started at UD in '57, and I know some of my basketball teammates, not I, but some of them were in ROTC as well as football players, and they had to be in there, if I remember right, 2 years.
Yeah, you had your first 2 years, and I'm sure that related to, you know, federal money that came to the university. And after I had 2 years of that, and there was a financial element to it too, because as you know, the advanced course in ROTC, you got a pretty good stipend each month, and it was good training. I thought it was some of my better courses. Although when you add up all the credit hours you had a major in accounting and a minor in theology.
So you graduated in '66. What did you do following graduation?
Well, I graduated from University of Dayton in '66.
Yeah.
And you know, that I had worked all through college and high school, for the most part, for Casanos. But it wasn't just flipping pizzas and cutting them and this, that, and the other. Eventually, I went from nights to days, learned the business, and also at age 17 and 18, I went around the whole area and trained people that bought franchises on how to make pizzas, how to run the shop, run the business. But somewhere along the line, I got wind that there was a opening in a title examination business in downtown Dayton. So I put in an application and got the job and basically ran titles. And I think I did that for a couple years. And suddenly I'm realizing that, hey, you know, undergraduate time is about up. What do I want to do? Although I was committed to the military, and since I looked around and saw a lot of attorneys running the same titles I was running, and they were making a lot more money than I was, I decided to go to law school. And that was really with the blessing of the ROTC department, because my first inclination and their inclination was to be in infantry. And but in the end, they basically, at their request, tried to get me in a program that between my junior and senior year, you actually, I don't know if it was called active duty, but you essentially went somewhere for 3 months and worked in a JAG office. And I'm going to say it whether I should or not, and I put in my application. I got a letter back from the JAG department, and I read it. Took me maybe 30 30 seconds to a minute and a half to read the letter, reread it again, and ripped it up. Because essentially, they basically said I was too dumb to be in JAG. And
where'd you go to law school?
I went to University of Cincinnati, and I had applied to numerous schools. And what I wanted to do was see if there was a law school program that started other than in the fall, like in January. And there were a couple schools. I think one of them might have been University of Illinois, but in those days, you pretty much got accepted no matter where you applied. But I thought I wanted to still be close to Dayton, so the easiest one for me, they didn't have University of Dayton Law School,
right,
to go to University of Cincinnati, and that's where I wound up.
Did you work while you were going to law school?
I worked running titles.
Okay.
I was married to my first wife my senior year, and but prior to that, I ran titles for Land Title Guarantee and Trust Company, and we lived in Cincinnati.
What was your first wife's name?
Judy.
Judy? Let me go back to your pizza business a minute. Cassano's, as I remember back in those days when I was in law school, undergrad, that was about the only pizza place in town, wasn't it?
For the most part, and Marion's Pizza blossomed, and I could be wrong, but I thought one of their first stores was on Linden Avenue, the same Route 35, down near Easttown Shopping Center. And somehow they had a split, and there was, I think, some litigation over that split, and that was finally resolved or dropped or whatever the case may be, and Marion's was an equal.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, and even, my current wife says that Marion's pizza tastes more like the original Cassano's than the Cassano's do now. So,
did you ever meet Vic Cassano or Mom Denise?
I didn't meet Mom Denise, but I eventually told him that I didn't want to work at nights. That was in high school. So they had me working in days, and that they knew I was majoring in accounting at the University of Dayton. So I moved into the accounting department at Cassano's, and had a full regimen. I knew that business backwards and forwards by the time I left there, and I left there for that more law-related, even though it was title exams, which are essential to all real estate transactions. But the interesting thing about Cassano's, and I did a survey, and this was among professionals, people with master's degree, law degrees, and so forth. I think I may have asked you too, and I was bound determined that I was going to send resumes after I graduated from law school from Vietnam. I thought that ought to attract somebody's attention. And so I called Harry Cassano, who I knew well, and I said, Harry, can I get your name as a reference on my resume? And he immediately said no. And it really kind of shocked me. I said, well, is there something I did wrong when I worked? He said, no. He said, I tell you what, I got a deal for you. He said, you come work for us after you get back from Vietnam, and we will hire you as our in-house corporate counsel. And we'll start you at $60,000 a year. Now this, you're talking 1970, 71 money.
Big money.
And I turned it down, and maybe I turned it down too quickly, but I said, all I can tell you, Harry, is I don't know anything about commercial law. I said, my favorite in law school was contract law and criminal law, which I did well in. And Harry's reply was, "We don't either. That's why we'd like to have you on board." And so eventually, after you got out of the military, I went to work for Lee Falky County Prosecutor. Started at a high salary of $12,500. And I talked to a lot of guys with masters and law degrees, and it seemed like the range was at $12,500 to $15,000. So when you reflect back on what Harry Cassano offered, maybe I was a fool, but that my heart wasn't there.
Well, let's get into your military. After you graduated from UC's law school, how soon were you in the military?
I was studied for the bar exam. I think we graduated the law school at the end of May, and took the bar exam. I believe, maybe don't have this exactly accurate, but at the end of June or July, I went to a bar study course for a month or so, and it was like a week after I took the bar exam, I had to report to active duty, and reported to Fort Benjamin Harrison over in Indianapolis, Lawrence, Indiana.
When was that you reported?
Pardon me?
When was it that you reported?
That would have been
August of
July or August of 69.
Well, I've got a note here that your initial date was August 10 of 69?
Right. So it must have been August that we finished up the bar exam.
And when you entered the military first, what was your rank?
I entered the military as a second lieutenant.
Was that because of your ROTC experience?
And I don't know, it was explained to me once because I got a certificate with an honorable discharge while I was still at University of Dayton. I said, discharge from what? And when you signed up for the advanced course, it's my understanding that actually you were put in kind of an inactive reserve status. That was their hold in case you reneged on your commitments, which didn't bother me. And then you were put in a different element of the United States Army. You got your lieutenant bars just before you got your diploma. When I reported for active duty, and the time though I graduated from University of Dayton and the 3 years of law school, you were in a reserve status. And so for the 2 years in the advanced course and the 3 years in law school, you had a lot of reserve status time, and eventually reported in August of 1969 for active duty.
So when you reported, the Vietnam War was going on hot and heavy.
It was going hot and heavy, and my first assignment, though, was at what was called Defense Contract Administration Region, Cleveland, Ohio. And I worked on the 18th floor of the federal building, and I was actually technically a finance officer, but then got a military occupational specialty of legal officer, and worked in the Office of Counsel, which was the legal office, like a JAG, but it was really run by civilians. I was the only military person in that office. And
what were your duties up there?
Well, one of the duties you had, regardless of the actual work in other areas, was I gave multiple death notifications in the Cleveland region of fellows that were killed in Vietnam, and you stayed with those families and assisted them for about a 3 to 4 month period. And in addition to that, I did a lot of contract work. And also, since they knew I had an accounting degree and finance background, they were trying to implement a broad-based computer program where logistics, acquisitions, and all this would be all computerized. And they asked me to write procedures for very low-ranking federal employees to look at a contract and fill in a worksheet with pencil, like LSAT or law school or whatever it is, all those tests you take where you use your lead pencil to fill in between the lines. And so I was to write the procedure for these people. And I had a hard time my whole life following directions. So my mindset was to work with the team I had to leave no stone unturned, that anybody who picked up those procedures and followed them step by step could correctly input this information to be put in the computer. And as time went on, and I can remember running into some problems on what stuff meant in these contracts. What was this? And I can remember going to see a GS-15. I was and asking a couple questions, and the GS-15 got mad at me, and he said, "What the hell you think you got them captain bars on your shoulders for? Figure it out." So I went back and figured it out as best I could, and completed the project a month ahead of time. And once the program was completed, I was transferred then to the Office of Counsel on a permanent basis. And from there, I did investigations such as bribery by major airplane manufacturers, bribery of the head of quality insurance at their factory. We did some criminal investigations in conjunction with the Department of Defense Security and the FBI, and general law questions. And never did I get an individual citation or just a letter or a note, "Thought you did a nice job on this, thought you did a nice job on that." But people would send me copies of letters that, like, the colonel that ran the installation got for the investigation that Office of Counsel did, i.e. me did the investigation and the report.
You did the work and he got the credit?
I did the work, well, kind of like that, but I thought it was nice that they would send a note. And after I left that office and went to Vietnam, I was there 3 days and told to report to the parade ground that I was going to get a medal. I couldn't figure, I've only been here 3 days, you know, so I went and I got a medal, and it was called the Joint Service Commendation Medal. I never got the citation until I was out of the Army. And in my efficiency report, when I left DeCasser, Cleveland, the colonel said that, and of course he was retiring, this was his big project, and it said all of a sudden it was collapsing, the software program wasn't working, and the first thing they did, and somebody told me, they thought maybe I screwed up on these procedures. So they went back with a fine-tooth comb, went from A to Z or 1 to 100 or whatever it was, and found out from reading my work that they found over 300 errors, not in my procedures, but in the software program. They were able to correct those, and the citation was something like, had he not found these and had we not been able to go through his work, this program would have been initiated with disastrous results. So it saved the colonel, it saved the GS-15 that put a lot of weight on them captain bars, and it of course the chief counsel was a GS-15, and what they did was a week before I left, they had a meeting with the GS-15, the colonel, the chief counsel, and the proposition was, we will have your orders to Vietnam rescinded. And if you like, we will hire you at a GS-13 level civilian. Your military career would be concluded, except any reserve time, extra reserve time you might have. So I kind of had my choice. The colonel was leaving, the installation commander. The GS-15 attorney was still there. You know, the big shot accountant was there that ran the finance area. And it was like an offer that was too good to refuse. But I turned it down. I refused it.
Why did you refuse that offer?
Excuse me. My answer was that I think I owe it to the survivors of all the death notifications that I gave not to avoid going to Vietnam by this change of fate. And I thanked them, and I said, I don't know what I would feel like 20 years from now, knowing that I was able to weasel out of going to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. That was the short and simple of it. Patriotic.
Let me ask you about this test that you mentioned. You had to give these, you had to notify survivors of the passing of their husbands and wives, husbands, sons, or whatever. About how many times did you have to do that?
I don't know the exact amount, but I'd say it was at least a dozen.
How would that chore fall on your shoulders?
Because no one was, you were the short man on the totem pole in rank, probably in the organization, but you just suddenly got a copy of an order that you're to give this notice. The first one I had, there were, you know, and I gave some for Marines, which I kind of objected to because I thought the Navy people in the installation, the Marines are part of the Navy department, they should have been the one. Not that I didn't want to do it, I just thought it was their obligation. And I'm sure they were saying behind the scene, well, you see them captain bars, that's all you got, so you do it. So I did them. And there were numerous ones, but the three that stuck out in my mind was I'm going to kind of start from the last one and go back. Helicopter pilot, unmarried, father and mother lived in Kent, Ohio. He was going to be buried in Kent, Ohio. I gave the death notification, and usually you see a reaction. It could be sorrow, you know, it could be just lost feeling. You couldn't detect that from these people. And eventually it got around where the body was shipped back and you're going to have a funeral service. It was either in the city limits of Kent or it was on the outskirts, but it was considered Kent, Ohio area. And it just so happened that that funeral, which I attended and helped supervise, was on the day of the Kent State shootings. And I didn't know they were occurring. I didn't hear anything until I got back to the installation in Cleveland, and it was liar's table time in the afternoon for a couple, and everybody was asking, hey, were you there? Did you see them guys get shot and all that? And the tone of the people was good riddance, this, that, and the other. It wasn't sorrow or what the hell did we do or something. I felt bad.
Well, for somebody that is watching this and listening to this 30 years down the road, describe that Kent State shooting as best you can.
Well, I look at it in different perspectives because, number one, I was there, didn't hear anything, but I was in Kent State on that day. And what I initially heard was, well, you had, I think it was National Guard troops with loaded rifles. You had a relatively young commander of that unit. And it wasn't just they showed up and start shooting people. They were having rocks and other things thrown at them.
These were students that were protesting the war?
Right. And you know, that during that situation, somebody gave an order to shoot, or, and that I never did fully understand, somebody might have just shot unexpectedly and then everybody's shooting. And then 6 or whatever number it was were killed. And then when you read history of it, you get a different perspective of it. But I guess if I was on that line shooting, I wouldn't say I'd shoot, but there's elements of self-defense in that too, and whoever gave the command. But it was such a politically sensitive issue. You know, the state settled the lawsuits that went afterwards, and the students, rightfully so, those who were killed, you know, were honored. I just clipped an article and put it in my little album about Vietnam and my work. You know, but the tone at the Federal Building was not against the National Guard, and how people, and of course the protesters, everyone's enraged, and the case was, I think, politically settled. You know, so that happened to be, for me, kind of an extraordinary case that you were there when history was being made. I can remember the father because he said, I would not accept that my son is in that casket unless I can see his hands. And I looked down, and he was a man of slight build, and he had very small hands. So I assume he was looking for the genetic link between him and his son's hands. Were you in that casket? No, but I told the undertaker to open it up and do it with reverence to only he sees the hands. And he was satisfied after that. I can't remember the exact date, but I think the Dayton race riots may have been before the Cleveland race riots. And I was part of being in and around Dayton when you had Jeeps in downtown Dayton, Jeeps with machine guns on them in neighborhood areas, you know, you know, it was like the city was under siege. And so I remember that. And one of my other assignments, in fact, my first assignment was to go about a block from 105th and Huff, which was kind of the nucleus of the race riots in Cleveland, and give a death notification to a black family. Here's this skinny first lieutenant, you know, showing up at a black family's house, just a short distance from the nucleus of what happened in Cleveland. And how are they going to receive you? And I was in uniform, went in, and I'll have to say, they were extremely gracious. The funeral service at the church was just packed, I can remember. And we did some ceremonial stuff afterwards, presentation of his medals and things like that. But my overreaction to the risk to me was really uncalled for in the end. But the third one that always rang in my ear was I was given orders to give a death notification in, I think, Lorain, Ohio. And it was to the widow. She was 19 years old. But it said, you're to give a missing in action report and say he's missing in action. Do not say, even though he has been killed, he died of burns or something like that. Do not disobey these orders. So I remember going and seeing her in her living room of her home, and she had family members. And she was pretty placid, but she knew something was up. And I said, we'll keep in touch, and I'll notify you of any change, or more information as it comes. 2 weeks later, I was ordered to go tell her that her husband had been killed in Vietnam. And I hate to use the word mistake, but you were in uniform, and to save my gas, which only cost back then at a Ohio gas station, 37.9, I would take the light blue for official use only vehicle. Pulled up in front of her house, went up to the door, the parents invited me in. She was not there. She was with some friends and her sisters out shopping. And I said, do you mind if I wait till she comes home? So they accommodated me. And
Well, had you told them that he was dead?
no, I hadn't told them that. I said, I have something to tell her. And they tried to guess, but I knew what the guy told me, and I was waiting to tell her. She's the only one I had to tell at that time. And she came home, and she's got like 3-4 girls out on the porch, and I heard this absolute wailing and crying, not from just her, but everybody, because they knew what I was going to say. She came in, she hit me. I told her, I'm sorry to tell you, but your husband, Michael, is now deceased. He was killed in action on such and such and such a date. My sincerest condolences and sympathy. And I remember her yelling at me, screaming at me, almost a howl from her. She spit on me, she slapped me, she hit me in the chest, and then she collapsed in my arms, and we both cried and couldn't stop. And then I wondered, what the hell are they sending somebody inexperienced like me to do this? Where are all these goddamn majors and colonels and stuff? Why aren't they the one? And it wasn't like in the movie. You didn't go with a chaplain. You didn't go with a major with you. You didn't take an EM and a whole support team. You went by yourself to do that. And I think I might have told you before, I probably spent a total of 4 months helping her out, and then you finally bring it to a conclusion, and I was leaving for Vietnam, and I remember her asking, she called me at the office, and she asked, do you mind if I send you letters when you're in Vietnam? And I, your first reaction, well, I guess it's all right. But then I said, no, I really feel proud that you asked that request, but I prefer if you didn't. And she wasn't offended because she still chatted on the phone. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't think it would be appropriate. And then I often wondered, and I didn't have it in the little bit of stuff that I gave you. I didn't have it where, and I'm kind of losing my train of thought. Later, I suddenly kind of had this guilt, that maybe I should have let her write, because it wasn't to help me, it was maybe to help her. And did I let her down? Mm-hmm. But that's history. So out of the dozen or so survivor assistance officers things, the young girl, the race riot area, and the helicopter pilot, at Kent State stuck in my mind the most. And I still think about them.
Well.
But you asked me a question before, and I don't know if we answered it on our previous version, but when I went in the military at Fort Benjamin Harrison, I was a second lieutenant. It was kind of odd because on the third day of class, and it was essentially officers training and specialization classes in your whatever branch you were in the Army. And they called me in front of the thing, and they read this piece of paper, and they promoted me to first lieutenant, and I only had 3 days of active duty. And what I found out was that 3 years in law school, being in a reserve status, counted towards your advancement and also your pay.
Well, that was good.
And so everybody around me was congratulating me, this, that, and the other. Then the irony of ironies was that I served 2 years in Cleveland, but after the first year, a day after my first anniversary of being on active duty, I was promoted to captain. And I said, hey, what the hell have I done to earn this? And basically it was time and rank and reserve status and whatever points accumulate and so forth. The other assignments that I had were like, the bribery investigation, the contract work, writing briefs for the Armed Forces Board of Contract Appeals, and the death notifications. Those were the type of things that I did.
Well, how did you come to end up going to Vietnam?
Well, I got a set of orders.
They gave you the choice, and you decided you didn't want to be a civilian, so you knew you had to go to Vietnam.
Yeah, I had orders to go to Vietnam because I remember the colonel told me, the installation commander, why would he be telling me, why would he participate in this? His career was saved by the fact that that big program, that was the highlight of his career, was saved. And it was this skinny, boy-looking captain that helped him out. And I read his evaluation, and this too was, they didn't give you a copy of your evaluation. You eventually left you had 2 weeks off, and then you were on a plane flying to Vietnam. And I never got these efficiency reports and commendations for medals and so forth until I was working for Lee Falke. I finally said, can you people send me this stuff? It wasn't in my 201 file. He put in his 201 file. I know this sounds far-fetched, but the reason I'm telling this is not so much for the public at large, but for my kids and people that know me, that don't know about my military career. But the colonel wrote in his report that that he recommends that Captain Petkewitz be appointed or elevated to the rank of major. And you're talking about a kid, be elevated to the rank of major and possibly be put in command of a branch of his office. And he said if it were in his power, I would promote him immediately. Well, it wasn't in his power, but that was his way, I took, of saying thank you. Mm-hmm. And the council who hired me to come work for them, it was a kind of a good feature for him because he made the right decision. And even though the big shot finance guy, I turned him down as being one of the picks, and it was almost like ha 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 ha, as far as I was concerned. Mm-hmm. And so then you went to Vietnam. Vietnam was...
Well, before we get to Vietnam, let me ask you about Judy. How did you meet Judy?
I met Judy on a blind date fraternity. You weren't allowed to have real fraternities at UD, but we had Alpha Kappa Psi, which was a professional business attorney, and it was open to anybody in the School of Business. And they would have these weekend dances. They'd rent a hall and get a keg of beer and have a DJ and this, that, and the other. And a good friend of mine who was also in ROTC and in business was dated her sister. And he said, I'll fix you up with Judy. So we met each other. I picked her up, weren't introduced. I just said, my name's Tom Petkewitz, you know, and this, that, and the other, and kind of hit it off from there. And eventually we got married my senior year in law school.
Okay, so you were married when you were in Cleveland and when you went to Vietnam?
Right.
So where did you live in Cleveland? Was she there with you?
In Cleveland, we lived on Brown Road in Lakewood, which was off of Detroit Street, I think, which runs east and west all the way through to Rocky River, between Cleveland and Rocky River. And it got Lakewood in between.
Did you live in a house or apartment?
We lived in a duplex. We had the upper duplex. People below us had the lower duplex. And the reason we picked that particular location, we had a dog. We had the dog when I was stationed at the 4 months or whatever it was in Fort Benjamin Harrison. And this place happened to have a nice kennel, fenced-in kennel. And it had a shelter that the dog could stay in. And we mostly had the dog in the house, but there were times we let him run in the kennel. We found out a couple weeks later, the landlord lived next door. His kids wanted to play with the dog. They opened the gate, played with the dog, then forgot to shut the gate. The dog was gone. Less than a week later, the dog was euthanized by the veterinarian who had a contract with the city of Lakewood, you know, on stray dogs. We had tags on it from Fort Benjamin Harrison, but we hadn't. My mistake. Didn't get the tags as of yet, you know, in Cuyahoga County, and so I complained to the city of Lakewood that they didn't have enough time. That if somebody had checked those tags, they could have said, yes, he was forwarded, this is his new address, through military records, and the dog would have been saved. Pay our fine, but then the issue was we didn't let the dog out. We had him confined. So at another liar's table session in the mornings after the dog was euthanized, I told the story to the people that were sitting around the table. And one of them was a GS 14 or 15 that worked in a contract procurement office of the organization. And so I was in chatting across the hall with this chief counsel in the legal office. And this guy comes in and says, hey, how you doing, Tom? And he says, Ed, who was the chief counsel, he said, you know what you need, Ed? You need this young attorney in your office. Anybody who could go after the city. And what they did was they fired the veterinarian. They set a new set of regulations, longer period. I was satisfied. Nothing was going to bring Freed back. But he said, you ought to think about hiring him. And by God, 2 days later, he said, would you like to work for us? And so it was not some big Supreme Court case. It was the fact you did justice for your dog.
So where did you and Judy get married? In Dayton?
We got married because I was in that reserve status. She was in, I guess I can't remember the name of the stuff, but it's Dayton View area, Upper Dayton View, and went to Assumption Church. I did not like the priest at Assumption Church. She didn't like the priest at Assumption Church. So I said, let me see if I can figure this out. So I went to the chaplain at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and he said that he would marry us at chapel number 1, and also because her father worked at the base, that he would rent a hall and we'd have our reception at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So he said, are you in the reserves? I remember the priest or the chaplain said, and I said, yes. He said, well, it's okay then. I'll authorize it, and that's where we got married.
Oh, good. So when was it that you actually went over to Vietnam? When did you go there?
It was kind of a process, but I think my first day in Vietnam was November 13th. I think the records show. Maybe off it a couple days, but I think it was November.
How did you get there? Plane, boat?
I went to New Jersey, stayed with a brother-in-law, took my wife. We went a couple days in advance, went to a couple restaurants and this and that, and bid everybody adieu. And after that, I went to some airport, either in New York or New Jersey, and spent the next 23 hours on planes. And landed at Benoit Air Force Base, spent about a week there, and eventually you got on a propeller transport plane and flew into Da Nang, and
well, let's use our map. Give Ken a little time to focus in on it. Okay, so
here is Da Nang, right where my finger is, and we were in what was called Military Region 1, which was the northernmost part of the U.S. command in Vietnam, and we spent time in Phu Bai, which I think was the headquarters of the 101st Airborne Division of the Army, and if I made a circle in this area, anywhere in, because I didn't work out of an office, I went into the field all the time, and did that add to the security you felt to a degree, because I didn't refuse. I just said, I will go by land vehicle, truck or Jeep, but I will not fly in a helicopter. And the people would ask, well, why not? And I said, all I remember is the 3 years that I spent in law school and the events with the young lady whose husband or the father was, and seeing all those people and the total grief. I said, and not only that, you'd watch the news every night, and it seemed like it was nothing but helicopters crashing in Vietnam. Now, it was a little bit different back then. They would show aftermath of a crash. Now they actually show those helicopters crashing on the news programs. And I think in that kind of report I gave you, or brief or whatever it was, it talked about I was ordered to go in a helicopter somewhere, and that served as a basis of anxiety, but not post-traumatic stress syndrome. I was never ordered into it. You know, they honored my request and had a driver and had security, and I just thought, I feel more secure on land than I do in a helicopter, and so.
So was it Da Nang where you flew into?
No, I flew into Benoit, and I can't. It wasn't close to Da Nang, but it wasn't that far away either, because it was a pretty lengthy flight, so I don't see it on here.
So then you went by transport down to Da Nang? Where did you go?
I went on a supply, looked like a paratrooper's plane, where you see the guy. That's the way you sat. You landed at Da Nang Airport, which looked like New York Airport, Washington D.C. Airport, massive base, and from there you made a phone call, and I said who I was, and was told to call this number for pickup to Camp Horn, which was in East Da Nang, because a massive river separated East Da Nang from West Da Nang, and you look across. It was about the size of the Ohio River, so if we were going somewhere in a vehicle, you always reported at a building that was close to these big iron gates that allowed access to the base. What was significant about about Camp Horn, you saw General Westmoreland walking around all the time. I think we saw Abrams once there, so in that short period of time, this was the top command in that area. And
Did you spend all of your time in that general area? Or did you go other?
No, I traveled all over the place, and you met at that office. You went in and told the captain that ran that office, or the secretary that was right there at the door. Mary Ann was her American name. She was Vietnamese, but everybody called her Mary Ann. And you told her, she knew who I was. We're going to Camp Haskins. We're going to West Da Nang real estate section. We're going to the South Vietnamese police, building. And so she always knew I was leaving. It was by land transport and where I was going. And as it turns out, at a reunion, I found out that the last day, all of a sudden we got notice, we're leaving Vietnam. And it was right at the infancy of what was called the Easter Offensive. And the U.S. troops were leaving. 101st pulled out. The fighting was going to be between the South Vietnamese, their first big test, South Vietnamese and the North Vietnamese, with air support from the U.S., except it was raining all the time and cloudy, so they got very little support. You had maybe one or two full colonels or light colonels that were embedded in these Vietnamese divisions, battalions, and companies to assist them. And these are the guys that had guts, because some of those battalions and companies defected to the North Vietnamese and invited the American commanders that were there as advisors to go with them. Save yourself. What happened, and there's a couple books that were written about the Easter Defensive. Some of these colonels, what they would do, they knew who was loyal and who wasn't loyal. And they would get contingents, and in the middle of the night, they left, but they weren't going to surrender. And whatever happened to these major South Vietnamese commanders, I don't know, but as far as where the city of Da Nang is, they had like 1 million people, so it wasn't a small village. I went north, south, east, didn't go west because that was the ocean. That was China Beach, same China Beach you saw on TV. So that was the area that, and then I see it looks almost like a circle here too, so somebody else must have been there. I can't see down in here. I'm just guessing right now because I really didn't look it up. We probably came in somewhere from Saigon, halfway up, and then to Da Nang. And you spent like a week or two just acclimating yourself, sitting there drinking coffee all day till they sent you somewhere. Now in those ventures, we had, and you didn't have an office job. The whole field was my office, so to speak.
Well, I was going to ask you, what were your duties while you were there?
My duties, I was a court-martial attorney. I also did contract work, same stuff as in Cleveland, only in a military type setting. And I used to have later on in life, I always had public sector attorney jobs, a lot of them in prosecutorial stuff. And I had a saying I developed: there are witnesses who you can't find because it's a crummy case, you can't find them, so who gives a shit? But there's no such thing as a witness who you really can't find. And that proved true on one court martial I had, it wasn't the dope dealer that was court-martialed. It wasn't the dope dealers, and we're talking about American troops. It was kind of a peon guy up in Fubai, and this group of other troops robbed him of his stash and a big amount of money. Well, they caught him and they were going to court-martial him. And he's gone. Couldn't find him. So a fellow by the name of Russ Fontenot, a lot of people made some ill-advised remarks about Russ Fontenot, and he had been either in a helicopter crash or a hard landing, and one such, he was airborne, and he jumped, I think, out of a helicopter as it was landing, probably hurt himself, but he didn't have any parachute on. It wasn't made to do that. And he, in his career, I think he made it to the top rank of major. But he was my bodyguard. He was from Louisiana. He always had a big chaw of tobacco and a can of like Maxwell House coffee 3-pound tin. And he'd spit in that thing at his desk. And wherever I went, I asked if Russ would help me and go with me. So, you know.
How come you picked him as?
Because he was so big. He was like 6'4", 250 plus pounds. And be honest with you, anybody who's got that big chaw of tobacco coming out the side has to mean something to somebody. But he was a tough character. And he was a JAG officer. He was an attorney. When he got out of the military, he went to work for an armed forces unit. I don't know what it was in some kind of legal work affecting that unit. But Russ and I, the first time we went out, we had to cross over the river, over a bridge, and then go. It seemed like it was an hour-and-a-half plus trip. The road was a dirt road, but it was wide, and like 50 to 100 yards on either side of the road, it was devoid of any vegetation. I'm sure they had dumped Agent Orange.
Because Agent Orange?
Yeah, and so you're traveling on these dirt roads. They weren't paved, and you're breathing in that dust and so forth. But we went looking for this guy, and we thought, let's start in the most obvious place. What barracks is he assigned to? And we went in, and here you have, in fact, if I could read something, this is kind of a picture album, but it's also a little bit of an after-the-fact diary. And hopefully I can find the quote, maybe I won't. No. I'm going to Da Nang and I'm going to be a lawyer. You know, piece of cake. But then I put down services in Vietnam was as an Army lawyer. I didn't think being a legal eagle should be out and about carrying an M14, yes, an M14, a .45 caliber sidearm, grenades, and wearing a flak jacket.
Were you doing all that?
Yeah. And I said, then I say, and I'm having a hard time seeing this, our unit's motto was honed in combat. And I put as a remark, that should have been a good tip.
Well, why are you wearing all this military gear?
Because as we're out and about, and in fact on this particular trip, like I say, it seemed like it was an hour and a half away. But we went in, we saw these, I thought I looked young. These guys looked really young. These were infantry troops, 101st Airborne Division. A three-stripe sergeant came up, slight build, and I said, where in the hell is so-and-so? And I'm sure it must have been a formidable sight that suddenly you got two of these captains coming in with all this regalia, rifles, guns, grenades. Where in the hell is so-and-so? And he said, in the wall. Just like in the wall. I said, what do you mean in the wall? Oh, that's his quarters in the wall. I said, what do you mean? He said, that's where he is. So I said, show me how you get in. He said, well, he knows how to open this piece of plywood.
Oh, really?
And I said, oh. And I reared back and boom, hit that thing. It collapsed. And here's this guy, higher than a kite, sitting on the floor with little vials of heroin and some cash even over to the side. I said, get your ass up on your feet. Then I looked at these two sergeants. The second one came up and I said, get me 2 MPs here immediately and tell them be ready to forthwith send him to the Da Nang stockade. He's a witness in my case. So there's no such thing as witnesses who you can't really find. And that's where I kind of developed that thing. I was lucky.
Well, do you have any court-martials that stand out in your mind?
The one I really can't talk about, I think it would be politically incorrect, but it was a young, good-looking, looked like a movie star, young kid that wanted to marry a Vietnamese girl. He unfortunately palled with a guy in his unit, mean guy, and they had the services of a North Vietnamese expatriated or whatever, patriated or whatever it was, who was their guide, who was their protector, so to speak. They went out for some heavy drinking, took him out between Da Nang and what's called Tin Shau Wash Rack, shot him dead. Threw him in a ditch. I don't know why they didn't take him and hide him, but they threw him in a ditch alongside the road, went to the Tin Shau Wash Rack, high velocity sprayers, thought they cleaned the Jeep and all that. Eventually they were both arrested. I was co-chair on his trial, with a full jury, and we put on our case, and I'm going to tell the political incorrect because it's truth. He was found not guilty, and so there came a point in time we knew something was up. Things were changing. All of a sudden, officers were in certain barracks, enlisted men higher up were in other barracks. The fighters, the troopers, the brave ones, they were in their own barracks. And big, massive restroom where you had sinks to shave, showers. And there's 2 or 3, 4 guys in the shower at the end of the day taking a shower. I'm at the sink shaving, and I recognize the voice as being a sergeant major in our outfit. Big, billowy voice, black man. And so I put plenty of
aftershave?
Not aftershave, but shaving cream on it.
Okay.
He wouldn't see me. Or recognize me. And so I heard the conversation. The conversation went something like this. Didn't you sit on that jury of the Jones kid, that blonde-haired kid? Well, I sure did. Well, what'd you do? Found him not guilty. What do you mean? They killed that guy. We found him not guilty. We applied the mere gook rule. He only killed a gook, so he had to be innocent. Honest to God, that was the statement. Did that rule apply? Yeah, I heard that statement in Vietnam. I heard it post-Vietnam, never before Vietnam. But on that trip to Phu Bai where we found the prisoner, we came back and there's a place called Dog Patch north of the Da Nang Air Base, and that's where that highway ended and branched out. And no American troop, enlisted or otherwise, was ever to stop at that village, do anything. It was basically enemy controlled, but it was a brothel. It was where you get dope and everything else.
And it was near Da Nang?
Yeah. And so anyway, as we're traveling, and this is getting towards dusk, we overextended our stays. We don't want to be driving around through here after dark. I see the typical black pajama conical hat, Russian Mauser type rifle, and like a canteen and stuff, heading through a rice paddy, going to a area on the other side of this block of rice paddies, or this rice paddy, I should say, to where there's brush, trees, and bushes. And I said, she's either, and you knew it was a she, you could just tell.
How could you tell? The way she walked?
The way she walked, and her slight build, and this, that, and the other. And she may even had like a ponytail or something in the back, but I remember making that statement. And I said, you know, I've never fired on the enemy with this, and I had an M14, that was 30-06, you know, rounds. And I said, should we stop and kill the enemy? And Russ instinctively said no. In fact, he got on the Jeep, and I mean, I remember looking behind us, and there's this cyclonic cloud of dust behind us that we're making. And we're going pretty fast, and we suspected this was either she's going out at night, or, you know, against American troops, or she's setting up these two captains that went through here earlier. They got to come back. So Russ said, we're not going to stop. And we went, and when we went through that village the first time, going up to Fubai, when we're going up there the first time, all kind of people around. And we just came through at a very delicate speed, and this, that, and the other. Coming back, I'd estimate we were going 60 plus miles an hour. There wasn't a soul that could be seen in that village. It wasn't dark yet, it was getting dusk. And we interpreted that just almost from looking at each other. Something ain't right here. I think we're targets. Mm-hmm. And who reported it, I don't know. I watched only my side. Russ watched his side, plus what's on front of him. And a report says that there were shots fired from the other side of the road. So we were in an ambush situation.
That's what I'm thinking, yeah.
And who knew we were going to Fubai? Marianne. When we were going, when we were expected back, what our route of travel was. But that wasn't the first time that happened. That happened on a trip to Camp Haskins, where you left the town, or not town, but city limits, so to speak. They didn't have regular city limits. The developed part, you were kind of out in the boonies, but it was open, except halfway there was like a mound, like an Indian mound, but somebody built a nice little Vietnamese home there. It wasn't like our homes. It was, you know, not a shack, but it was nice. All kind of bushes around it. And we took fire from that area where the bushes were, and we were in the back of an M37 truck. I was with my back to the cab of the truck. Why? So I could look right, so I could look left. And I think there were 4 of us in the back of that cab. And when the rifle fire came, the guy across on the other side of the, like a small Jeep pickup, came across and got down like he's taking cover. But when he came, I had this foot propped up on the wooden slatted seat that ran the length of the thing. He rammed with his knee into the side here, which rammed this part into the wooden slats, and my leg was severely injured. I remember jumping on, there was a lieutenant, because that was the second trip with him on a truck that something odd happened. And, you know, I went to the China Beach Hospital, or dispensary, or whatever you call it, and the doctors looked at it and they said, we can't do surgery, but you're going to need surgery, because I had blood clots, I had severed veins, mm-hmm. You know, ram part of my knee into that slat too, and they says, this may be your ticket home. And I said, well, I'm not leaving And so let's see what we can do. And he said, well, you got to put heat on it, heat, and a compress, like not suppos, but the bandages, ACE bandages. And so for the next 3 weeks, back in that time I did stay in the office, didn't go out. We had a house mother who, when you look at pictures now, she looks relatively young, probably mid-30s. But then she looked a lot older than we did, because we weren't even 30 then.
Yeah.
And she had
on that trip where you did get hurt, did you make it through there okay?
Well, we made it through there, but we had to come back, and we came back uneventful. This house mother, what she did for me was, she had a gallon bucket or tin bucket or coffee thing again, and she would put a towel in there, let it boil, and she'd reach in there with her bare hands and wring that thing out and put it over all those bruises and subcutaneous bleeding and all that. How in the heck she could, other than my mother was like that. And maybe it's the female trait that they're invincible. But so when...
So do you think Mary Ann had something to do with that?
I think Mary Ann knew where we were going. We picked up the Jeep, or the driver came right in front of the building, went in, told her where I was going. Probably did. I don't necessarily tell her. If the captain's there, I'll yell in at her.
She's listening.
Right. And
I've heard
then,
other guys tell me that in their base camp that they're getting haircuts from somebody or shave, and this Vietnam guy is trying to kill them at night. Same thing with cooks and some of the girls that cleaned their hooches and stuff.
Exactly. And this happened to be somebody that was well respected, but after I left Vietnam, some way I had, and you might recognize him, and if you don't today, look in the law library, Ed Unwrinklereed. And he wrote this massive encyclopedia thing on evidence. He's a professor yet at Davis University in San Francisco. And he was the guy that I would report to that I'm going somewhere. And but he told me, yeah, Mary Ann, we were there on our last day, and she got arrested for embezzlement, and they had to keep a lot of cash in a vault. And supposedly it was in the thousands and thousands of dollars that she stole. Why? We're moving out. She's going to move out with the cash.
Yeah.
But the other thing was, 3 days, I think, before we were leaving because of the Easter offensive and this massive pullout, we were told to turn in our gas masks. And it was the talk of the town, so to speak. You know, loose lips sink ships or whatever it is. It didn't apply apparently in Vietnam. But anyway, we turned those masks in, and just like you see or hear about in World War I, we had a massive tear gas attack on all of Camp Horn. I mean, it was thick, like if you drove through pea soup, fog driving on a highway. That's the way the tear gas was. No tear gas masks, and you tried to find, every now and then there was a place, an office, a hooch, where somebody sent off for a little tiny air conditioner. You'd knock at the door and people would say, stay out, or you'd open the door anyway. You couldn't have got in that room. So there was a buddy of mine, we were together when this happened. We went back to our hooch, but you couldn't go in because they didn't have glass and windows and eaves, they had screens, so all that gas would come in. We finally found a couple chairs, took them down to a dock that was on the river, not far from where we stayed, and you had a little bit of a breeze coming off that river. And but it was a full-fledged World War I type gas attack, on us. So you had the Phu Bai coming back thing, you had the trip to whatchamacallit, and you had the gas attack, and at night, even though, and we're talking about Ohio River type width, you'd see tracers coming from West Da Nang. Why they were allowed to treat, well, you know, one of the allow that to happen. One of the things was these weren't like sentinels on the other side shooting down at the river. You know, these were arcing shots trying to make it to Camp Horn. Mm-hmm. So you had to be careful. If it looks like rounds are coming our way, you stay out of it. And of course, all night long, you'd hear these concussion grenades going off, not far from where you were sleeping, and it was to get the equivalent of somebody, the enemy trying to infiltrate from the river, and those concussions, if you were in the water, you wouldn't hear anything after those things went off. You know, so you had those instances where, why did you take an M14? Because I wanted the loudest sounding weapon I could take with me. And then you had a 45. You had grenades.
Did you ever fire either one of them?
Yeah, I fired both of them, particularly the 45. I pulled a 45 on some people passing dope through a fence line. And we had an area where, we called it the rec area, the recreational area. We'd have a volleyball game kind of back in a corner of the base, very unfortified. Had a weak looking fence and concertina wire, which is that wound bob wire. But I remember in training how to step over concertina wire with pretty at ease. And I always thought it was a security risk. I never told any commander of mine about it because he played in those same games that I did, and you know, that we were in a building which would be considered our area of duty, about the size of a barracks, filled with people doing all kind of things. And about 30 yards from that was a smaller building. And what happened, why it happened, who did it, I don't know. But 2 U.S. troops were killed because that building exploded, just poof, exploded. That was 30 yards from where my duty station was, on the base. So did they come through, you know, that unfortified
area? Night
area?
or daytime?
Yeah, well,
Night?
this was night. And here you're talking about the highest generals in the U.S. Army would visit this base from time to time. The regular commander of Military Region 1 was a 3-star general. And so was it a secured area? The fact that you weren't in the jungle, you were in Da Nang, you know, was it safe? I was always leery. And but there were guys that, well, we're going to West Da Nang and go to so-and-so restaurant or bar for the evening. See you later. Hope to see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
And
so what was your hooch like there at Camp Horn?
it actually, because you were an officer, it was like a dorm room. You had a separate door. It wasn't all open. You know, it was about the size of a customary dorm room. It had.
Was it wood or was sandbags? Or
no,
what?
it was wood, and we didn't have a lot of sand. We had a big corrugated pipe. Sometimes you see them all along the highway when they're putting them in. Great big thing. On that, it was covered with sandbags. That was, you had to go down about 3 rooms, out the door, and then around, and then in if they had a rocket attack. And that was about as secure as you could get. Now, a lot of guys thought I was a little weird because every now and then I'd practice going to that thing, and I'd want to make sure.
Get there as quick as you could?
Yeah, I'm the first one in there, and I'm not going to be on the outer parts of those things. So they provided security like that, but you never knew what circumstances. And also, one of my assignments was to visit this fortified building that was called the Da Nang Police Station. And in the news, prior to Vietnam, And while in Vietnam, rocket attack on Da Nang police, but it was so fortified, that still you heard rocket attacks on, and I was assigned to go there to work. So you never knew what was going. After a while, you put all that, you still didn't not be cautious. And I was probably more cautious than the rest of them. Why? Because I did a shitload of survivor assistance officers cases. And I didn't want my wife to go through that. And I will say about my first wife, I'd get booed at mail call. And because she would send sometimes a dozen to 15 letters, cards, flyers, magazines, and they'd keep going, Petkewitz, boo, this, that, and the other. I loved it. And,
sure.
And so...
and did you write home often?
Yeah, I wrote probably at least every other day.
Well, how about
but only one per mailing.
how about your parents? Did you communicate with them?
No, never received a letter from them. I might have sent them a letter or a card.
Where was Judy while you were in?
She was living with her parents on Shaftesbury Road, Upper Dayton View, by Miracle Lane Shopping Center.
What was the child like over there?
It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. And again, we didn't have a. They say it really wasn't like a mess hall. It was like I can't think of the cafeteria restaurants that used to proliferate, the Dayton area. But you were an officer. You were served good food. You had tablecloths on your tables and clean and the food never stopped. If it was breakfast, you had eggs fixed every which way that you could think of, all kinds of meats and this, that, and the other. Same way with lunch. The thing you had to watch at lunchtime, though, you eat too much at lunch, man, your eyes got so heavy, so heavy.
So who cleaned your hooch and who did your laundry?
We had there was a laundry contractor, and you would drop off uniforms, underwear, this, that, and the other in a bag that they provided. They would do your fatigues. They'd starch them. They'd iron them, fresh everything. And we had.
Was this a Vietnamese outfit? Or?
Right. And then there was a contingent of Vietnamese women that cleaned your room. At the first part, you didn't even lock your room. You had personal items. Never was anything come up missing. The place was always nice and tidy. The bunks were made. We had, what do you call it, over and under bunk beds like. And in fact, towards the end of my stay, my original roommate got out early from Vietnam and left Vietnam, and it was really, I was the only person in that room. Then suddenly, after the Easter offensive, things changed drastically. All those people that we relied on were gone. All new people came in. My wife sent me a nice watch for Christmas. I remember it was gone. Any personal item you left unlocked or unattended was gone. And that took place for about a month before you were pulling out.
Oh, is this the Vietnamese are stealing from you, or there's some of your
No, this it was the Vietnamese cleaning people.
Mm-hmm.
And then on that third day, I'm going to let that ring. On the third day, we were to turn in our weapons. And then the issue in the back of your mind was, for God's sake, what's going to happen, like the gas mask, when we turn in our weapons? And fortunately, we did it in the morning, and I think by evening we were shipped off to you had to spend 3 days on a detox, whether or not you were using dope or not. Everybody had to go through 3 days of being under guard, that you weren't hooked on. And the significant thing, and I'm in a support group down in Troy, and And I said, the thing that was the strangest to me is they shipped in a lot of security people from the field, as security for Camp Horn. And they barracked them in these regular looking wooden barracks that you see in the military. You could walk in between barracks buildings, and the heroin vials were so thick it was like gravel. And I said, can you believe that? And a guy that spent way out in the boondocks, I can't remember where it was, in some kind of microwave special, brand new in the field communications equipment, he said, there's no different in between our places, nothing but barracks. And I only read as of late, there used to be a lot of fragging in Vietnam.
A lot of what?
Fragging, that's where platoon leader, captain, company commander in the field, we're talking about infantry, they didn't like what he was doing. They thought he was putting them in danger. They didn't like his command style. You roll a grenade under his cot or bed or whatever it is, it explodes, he's killed. And it's payback, kind of. We can't have this guy. But also, if a new young commander came in, let's say lieutenant up to captain, and he was going to crack down on the dope use, that was another way to get yourself fragged. And I never realized that till I read it maybe 2 or 3 months ago.
2 or 3 months ago from today?
Right.
So you never experienced that?
No.
While you were over there?
No.
Nobody ever told you about it?
No.
Well, you were over there from November 13th to April 7th, and you were assigned to HHC. What was that?
Headquarters and Headquarters Company. That's where the commander of Military Region 1 was. And I was detailed to the Staff Judge Advocate's office, and they changed my MOS, Military Occupational Specialty, to Assistant Staff Judge Advocate.
And you were with the 24th Corps?
Right.
Now you have two DDs, DD 214 and DD 215. Why'd you have two?
One they made, and I think I had more than one DD 215 because there were errors made on dates, years, and stuff like that. So to get that corrected, the official correction is like on these DD 215s. And that happened 2 or 3 times, even years after I was out of the military.
Where did you fly from to get out of Vietnam?
From Da Nang Air Force Base, nonstop to Oakland.
Was that a military transport or
No,
commercial?
it was. I think it was, and I could be a little confused on the issue. Eventually, you got on what was called Flying Tigers Airline, and whether or not the Flying Tigers corporation or unit or whatever it was flew us back, I don't know, but it looked like a regular commercial plane. I think they held like 300 people.
So you were in the 3 campaigns, Consolidation 1,
Right,
Consolidation 2,
right,
and Ceasefire Campaign?
right. Those are kind of luck of the draw. If you served between certain dates, some of them, no matter where you were, if you fell in that niche of those dates, that was considered participation in a campaign. So, my military records show those 3. And they were towards the end where we were pulling out. Probably that last one went all the way till, I left in April of 1972. I think our last involvement was, 75, 3 years after that. So that last one may have been part of that. Or they may have had even a 4th one that was basically saying bye-bye.
So tell me about, you got a Bronze Star. What was that for?
Just meritorious service as an officer, you know. I don't know how the thing actually read, but to be frank with you, if you were an officer in Vietnam, you got a Bronze Star. You could get one, which is the regular grade, or you could get a V for valor. And I didn't get one for valor.
You got an Army Commendation Medal?
Yep, that was from service in Cleveland.
A Meritorious Unit Commendation?
Yes, they call it a badge, but it's a ribbon you wear on the one side versus the other, and the unit got meritorious service, and you were allowed to wear that ribbon.
You got a Vietnam Service Medal with 3 Bronze Service Stars?
That's for those 3 campaigns, yes.
You got a National Defense Service Medal?
Right, that everybody gets that served in the military.
You got a Joint Service Commendation Medal?
That was again from the work in Cleveland.
And I think you got some more, but I don't know what they were.
I don't know. I don't know the name of some of them, but the interesting photograph, I think, is when I was promoted to captain, I had 1 medal on. That was the National Service Defense Medal.
I'll turn that toward the camera.
I don't know if you can see that with that glare on it.
Sorry, Ken, to be so long on this.
I forgot to tell you, my nickname was Tommy Loquacious.
No glare.
Can't see it?
I saw it.
Oh, okay. And then this was way after Vietnam, but from the time I was promoted to captain to the time I got out of Vietnam, then these are some of the awards and what you were allowed to wear on your uniform. This was at a high school Veterans Day. I wore my uniform.
You got it? Okay.
I don't know if you saw that or not.
Let's see these pictures that you have there.
This is a picture before I was commissioned, but I was in the ROTC program, and this was our 6 to 8 week summer training that we had in Pennsylvania. Got it? This is a picture in Vietnam. This is outside the U.S. Embassy in Da Nang. And we had some kind of project that I had to go to. It was called the Da Nang Real Estate Office. It's really like the recorder's office in the county.
He's got it.
And I think this is the same picture. It's just chopped and cropped outside the embassy. And then this was a picture.
Who is that?
This was my first wife, Judy. This is
Where
my.
is that taken?
This was taken with the Pacific Ocean behind me on my first day. On my first day back from Vietnam.
You've got one of the, looks like a Civil War cemetery monument.
Right. One of my, I was not actively, by myself involved in a lot of military things, not necessarily as a participant, as a group, but things that we would do. And one of the things we did was look for Civil War, tombstones at rural country cemeteries. And I don't know if you can get a shot of this, but this was a fellow in the 110th something infantry who mustered out of, I believe, either Piqua or Columbus. And you can see the deterioration of the stone, the not moss. What's the other stuff that forms in your basement? Whatever that black stuff is, and really encrusted. And we would look for these stones, or we would try to find relatives, because you can't just go clean a stone without permission from the family members. Some of them we couldn't find any family members. So part of our journey through doing these was to try to find some of the people, and we would have worked on the stones. We found a massive number of stones that had been run into, either vandalized or some other means that, they couldn't be redone. Are we okay with this one? Okay. After we were done with this one, this is what it looked like.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, we've been at this a good while. Let's take a quick trip through your post-Vietnam career. You came back here. Did you say you got a job with Lee Falke?
Right. I sent Lee Falke a resume from Da Nang, Vietnam, and he wrote back and he said, as soon as you're back, call Bernice at this, and gave a number. He said, we'll talk.
And that was the Montgomery County
Right.
Prosecutor's Office?
Right.
How long did you work there?
I was there about 3 years.
Then where'd you go?
I went to Wright Pat. Wright Pat headquarters. It was 2750th Air Base Wing, it was called. I can't remember the name of the general that was the commander of the air base, and worked in the JAG office of headquarters at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And then that was only a short stint. I really liked the job there, but I don't know if you knew Stan Phillips, the Dayton City prosecutor.
I did know Stan became a common pleas judge.
Right, and well, now are you thinking of Stan? Did I say Phillips?
Yeah, you said
yeah,
Stan.
it was somebody else. I can't remember his name. I thought that was a misname. But anyway, he died. He was the Dayton City prosecutor. He was the head prosecutor, head of that division, the criminal division of the law department. And he died unexpectedly. And I guess if I had a forte in Falke's office, I handled a lot of big drug cases. And organized crime unit called me at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, told me that, hey, they're looking for a prosecutor. We would recommend you if you're interested in the job. I turned him down and I said, no, I just took this one. I hate to leave. Slept on it, called him first thing in the morning. I said, go ahead, put my name in. So I felt bad by leaving Wright Pat. But on the other hand, I went and became Dayton City prosecutor. I was there about 1.5 years and became deputy law director. And about a year after that, I became City of Dayton law director.
And Was that your last employment, City of Dayton?
No, let's see. Let me. Can I just take a quick look at that?
You worked up at Miami County.
Yeah. Yes, I went to. See, I'm going the other way. I guess one of my fortes in the law department, you had your own specialty. I guess as law director, you could pick that. And I liked labor relations and employment matters. And had a lot of cases in federal court, had a lot of cases in common pleas and the Court of Appeals. So I went to work for a firm called Clemens Nelson and Associates. And also around that same time, I served in the big-time position of law director of the village of Kelly's Island, Ohio.
Oh, up in
and that little island had more litigation than you could shake a stick at. So you gained experience there. And then I was hired as an assistant county prosecutor by Jeff Wellbaum up in Miami County.
In Troy, Ohio.
Right, in Troy, and then was promoted to chief civil assistant. And while Gary Nasel and Jeff Wellbaum, he accepted a judge position. I think there was a vacancy there. So I served as the acting prosecuting attorney until that was resolved. And then I retired on February 1st, 2000. And that was, on that date, I was 55 years old. And I'd always said I'm going to retire when I'm 55. When the February 2nd rolled around, I was 56. So I completed my goal. And then, like I say, you know, the tombstones, the goodie bags, you know, things like that, where I would write articles out of local newspapers, magazines, and stuff about fishing, hunting, and stuff. And we put those magazines in the goodie bags that were made in Darke County to send to the troops in Iraq and in other locations. Went to a lot of continuing legal education through the Army and National Guard and so forth. So you met up with people that you served with over in Vietnam.
Sure.
And so I always kind of stayed associated and really got out of it when COVID came. Yeah. And suddenly you were gone from the loop for 3.5 years and never really got back into it. I did a lot of articles on, not a lot, 3-4 articles on
Let's see if Ken can home in on these medals and awards that are framed here. Can you point out what some of these are?
Okay.
Can you see it?
Most of these medals are listed on your DD 214.
Okay.
But at the medal ceremony where I got the Vietnamese honor medal, this one here, on one of our last days, I also got a second medal, this one here, which is different, but the issue came up that this maybe should have been the medal that goes with this ribbon, and it's some kind of Vietnamese valor or something or other, and I just don't have the name right now. But this Joint Service Commendation Medal, this is Army Commendation Medal, this is National Service Defense Medal. This one I put in here because there was a recent case in the Supreme Court where the courts would always defer to the interpretation of regulations made by an agency. They suddenly upset that on some EPA and stuff like that. This one here, to a degree, was contested because what is 6 months service? Is it 180 days? Is it service during 6 months in Vietnam? Is it some other calculation? This medal is listed in my Army records as having been received, but whether or not I qualified for it, but I want to make sure nobody thinks this is stolen valor, because the records are unclear as to this medal and this medal. But
What's this badge?
this is the patch for 24th Corps.
Okay.
And this is they changed it.
What, right here?
This one here is basically, and even Gary Loxley said, I think you should have put the JAG one in there. And this is for Finance Corps.
Okay.
And you wore that on your uniform above these two medals. So to satisfy him, I had a lapel pin I put in there that was JAG Corps. That doesn't go on your uniform. These are Finance Corps. Gary also got on to me because that one picture where we're at the high school affair, that he said, why didn't you wear your JAG things? And you know, so.
And Gary Loxley is a current judge down in Warren County.
Right, and he served, I think, 30 years in JAG and other. He had 30 years in and is retired from the Army Reserves. He was always, seemed like he was always in some special event, some promotion, and he would invite me to these things. I'd go, and since I wrote for these two magazines and as a contributing writer for the Greenville Advocate, I'd always do a nice article about him when he got those.
Well, let's finish up talking about your family now. What happened with you and Judy? Was there divorce or death or what?
No. She's happily married, remarried. The irony was I was married to her about the equivalent time I've been married to I said, I'm fast approaching my 50th, but I said, but it was just one of those things.
And your present wife's name?
Martha.
Where did you meet Martha?
At a gathering.
When did you and Martha get married?
She'll kill me for this.
It's a good thing she's not here. This is a test.
We got married on St. Patrick's Day. I always remember the St. Patrick's Day, and I believe it's 1997.
And have you had any children with either wife?
No. Oh yes, my first wife. We had three daughters.
And their names?
Would be Missy. She died at age 32.
I'm sorry.
And Amy, she's a school teacher at Carroll High School. And Stephanie, I don't know how she got involved in it, but we met every Sunday for I don't know how long at the county prosecutor's office in Miami County to tutor her in all her accounting courses. And if I had had the workload that she had at Sinclair College on her accounting stuff, I would have never passed accounting. I mean, the workload they gave those kids. But she got through it, and we worked through problems. Didn't give her answers. She had to find the answers, but we worked at it always a half a day every Sunday morning for I don't know how long. She got her associate degree, and she was kind of in real estate management somewhere down in Dayton. And I think when she had her first child, though, she asked if she could have the child at her office, which was another room in an apartment building. They wouldn't allow her to do that, so she gave up that job. And what she's had since then, I really don't know.
Okay.
And Martha's had one son, and he's a farmer, and he works for an implement dealer. He's been working for the implement dealer ever since he was a teenager. He's in his 40s now, so all his kids show cattle at 4-H. They never come to look at my ribbon.
Where do they live?
They live on a farm in Mississinawa Township near Union City, Ohio.
Okay. What's the most outstanding memory you have of your time in Vietnam?
I think it was meeting people that you became close friends. I give invitations, hey, come to Dayton. They give invitations, come to Wisconsin, come to Arizona. Did we ever? No. It's just something about the military. Your time is up, and it's like that history almost fades. And that's the only way I can explain it.
Well, I asked some fellows, while you were over there, did you have any visits from anybody from the USO? Any entertainers come over?
We had an officers club, and so did the NCOs, the enlisted, and I think they traded acts. You always had a live act, a band, a singer. If you had an Australian beauty as the lead singer in a band, the place was packed. We didn't have too many U.S. singers. We did have a USO show that was well attended on base once. It was a big show, and I don't remember the name of it wasn't Bob Hope. I used to go to the museum out here at Wright Pat and watch the reruns of Bob Hope shows.
Oh,
and
he was great with the vets.
And I was treated and went on multiple occasions to the real China Beach Hospital and played tag football or flag football on China Beach, and they had Philco Ford ran the place. They had a big restaurant. Once a month we'd go over there and have dinner, or somebody's leaving and we'd have a send-off, so. But I think the closeness that you had with certain, and maybe the term isn't correct, select people, is because friendships develop, and you remember those people the most.
Now, you got your leg pretty badly hurt. How is that? Did you recover from that completely?
Well, when I retired from all public employment, my first year and a half, I was on crutches. I was on the couch watching TV because my knee really bothered me. The veins bothered me. You took treatments with really high, compression hose where you had to wear like pantyhose. I could see why women struggle with pantyhose, when you're a guy and you're putting those things on. And the veins still bother you, the knee bothers you, but there were periods of time where you took painkillers. If I was going to cut the grass, I had to take a painkiller an hour before I cut grass, so the pain wouldn't be there when you cut grass. I'm closer to 81 than I am 80, and I still walk behind a lawnmower, even though it's self-propelled because of the slope of the land, you're pushing most of the time, and you guard on how long you do that each day, and you kind of watch it.
Now, I don't see in your medals a Purple Heart or anything. Did you?
No, I put in for a Purple Heart, and they denied it, and they didn't say that. And the reason I put in for it, there is a provision under Purple Heart that if there is an accident involving a motor vehicle, that serves as a basis, for a Purple Heart. And the legal issue there was whether or not the guy coming across ramming that, and there was no contention that you got wounded some way,
right?
The severity of the injury, but they said the bottom line was they went through all this and they said, there's no evidence that it was the enemy that caused the wound. And I said, well, but for getting fired at and this happening, and the guy claimed it was his accident, yeah, it was in a vehicle, does that raise to that level?
Yeah. Ken, you've been real patient doing this filming. Anything come to mind you'd like to ask Tom about?
Well, I just find it interesting with the USO show, the people you had, because I've heard other individual soldiers, and they've had big names such as Uma Merkel from Covington, Kentucky, which is rather humorous.
We never had a country western.
This was an actress.
Okay. And 75% of the shows that we had at the Officers Club were Oriental. And the truth of the matter is, if you found a singer, especially Australians, and they were round eyes, and that's a little discriminatory, maybe it's not politically correct, you made those shows because these were absolutely gorgeous ladies and reminded you of home.
Sure.
Anything else?
No, that's about it.
So you're on 100% disability now?
Yes, total and permanent.
You had quite a problem with some lady that examined you and turned you down?
Well, she turned me down, but nobody else did. And when she put in there, and I don't know if you read that part, that he was ordered to take a helicopter somewhere, so he had to comply, and this raised his anxiety level, but it didn't raise to the level of post-traumatic stress syndrome. And my answer to that was, it never happened, number one, but number two, you still won't get me on a helicopter. Well, why not? After the fact, what are some of the circumstances and symptoms that you go through? For example, what's the helicopter called? The Premier Health. I never can remember that. Something Care.
Care Flight.
Yeah, Care Flight. Care Flight flies out of Versailles. We're halfway between Greenville. This lot here, these these helicopters from that location fly directly over our house a lot of times, and it was flying to New Madison on a car wreck, and it attempted to land, and nobody told the guy you're landing in an area with all these high-powered lines, and it crashed. So, now I went through their services, you know, on a heart-related issue down to the Good Samaritan Hospital, you know, from Troy, but I was in their emergency. It was like an emergency room van, big van, and it was raining cats and dogs. It was like you could just sense that ambulance was moving, and Martha followed my daughter, and she said Amy passed her like she was standing still, and she said both that ambulance and your daughter were driving like maniacs, but couple started a new business. The craze now is use helicopters for crop dusting. They're taken off from their location, you know, fairly close to Greenville, crashed before they got to the end of the driveway on their property. Both of them were killed. The next week or two, same type of plane, same arrangement, crashed and pilot killed in Clark County. So, has anything changed my opinion about riding in helicopters?
Right.
No.
Right. Well, this has been quite an interesting and quite a long interview, but thank you for your service.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for doing this
Thank
interview.
you. And you need to be commended for being one of the few people that never said Greenville, oh, that's so far.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I'm good.
Okay, hit the red button.
Appreciate your help.